Recording in progress.
All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome. It is 6:04 p.m. here in the ASD boardroom. Today is Tuesday, December 5th, 2023. We'll call the meeting of the Anchorage School Board to order. Present in the boardroom are myself, Member Jacobs, Member Donnelly, our student representative Pack, Member Holloman, Lessons, and Wilson, and then online is President Bellamy. We have Superintendent Bryant and a host of supportive staff here. Wanted to first welcome everyone and say that we want to welcome you to our meeting and thank you for attending and supporting the work of the Anchorage School District and this board. The board thanks students, parents, teachers, staff, and school business partners in the entire community for your investment in our district with your time, your talent, and your tax dollars. With that said, we will have our flag salute led by Mr. Peck, followed by our land acknowledgement.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We acknowledge that we gather here today on the traditional lands of the Dena'ina people of the Upper Cook Inlet. For thousands of years, the Dena'ina people have been and continue to be the stewards of this land. AST is committed to diversity and inclusion, and it is with honor and respect that we recognize all Indigenous people who live and learn in our community.
Thank you, Mr. Pack. We've completed our land acknowledgement and opening statements. We now have the approval of the agenda in front of us. Would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as written.
I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Made by Member Holloman, seconded by Member Lessons. Any opposition? Hearing, seeing none, we have an agenda. Thank you. Our first item under B1 is the student representative report. Mr. Pack, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So tomorrow we are looking forward to the second community convening for the CCL initiative, and we have some student representatives from AST attending that. We also are looking forward to a packed meeting next week for our December student advisory board meeting. We have currently, I believe, 4 resolutions up and ready to be discussed and debated, ranging from creating precedent giving weighted grades to middle college classes, which is something that some middle college students have been fervent for and passionate about advocating, and it's exciting to see debated. We also have OSOG resolutions, as well as the Wasilla Matsu student rep resolution that's going to be discussed, and kind of following along the news around that. They're in the midst of a lawsuit, I believe, against their school board, and it is very interesting to see how it is unraveling from here, and hope to see what happens from there. That is the end of my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peck. Any questions for our student representative? Okay, hearing, seeing none. Thank you for your report, sir. We'll move on to B2, military report. That has been canceled for this evening and will resume in January. Next up is item C1, goal monitoring, CCL, indicator attendance grades 9 through 12 technical reports. Dr. Bryant, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me allow the team to pull up the PowerPoint. Perfect. So today I'll be presenting the technical report on grades 9 through 12 attendance. This is an indicator for the board goal of college, career, and life readiness. Next slide. So our CCL goal is stated at the top of this slide, and followed by that is the rationale that that links attendance to success in life. So that will be there for the board to review in preparation for our formal discussion at our next board meeting. And on this slide, you'll see the percent of students with 90+% attendance over time. Not on this slide, but something that I would like to share is that as of December of this year, 65% of students are attending school at 90% or above. That's for this school year. So that would be a market increase from the 54% number that you see for 22-23. So that's something that we can speak to as well at our discussion at our next board meeting, but that is an exciting data point that I've just received. Next slide. This slide disaggregates attendance rates by grade level, and on the slide, you'll also be able to compare the last 2 years of data. The percentage point changes from year to year are placed in the last 2 columns. Next slide. And on this slide, you'll see our attendance data disaggregated by race and ethnicity and special subpopulations. And again, you can compare the year-to-year change in the last 2 columns. You'll also have data available to you that disaggregates attendance data by school type, which is comprehensive, alternative, and charter schools. And then on these next few slides, we'll show the next steps that talk about what we intend to do to improve attendance in the district. On this slide, notably, the second to last bullet illustrates the connection specifically between attendance and academic success as measured by grade point average, which is really interesting to look at, as well as an external resource for the board to review. And then, of course, next up, we'll discuss the actual strategic pillars for improving attendance. And this would include things ranging from professional learning to data monitoring and family engagement. And then on this slide, it breaks down our attendance plan into 5 strategic pillars for improvement, ranging from our multi-tiered systems of support to our data dialogues, professional learning, intervention, and curriculum, instruction, and also curriculum. And then lastly, we'll define the school types, and for the public's awareness, how we define charter school, alternative, and comprehensive high school on this slide, as well as those sites or programs that are not included in the data that we've reviewed today. And of course, this is just a preliminary technical report, and we'll have a formal dialogue with the content experts and myself to talk about how we can continue to improve attendance, which will be an important thing that we monitor regardless of how we eventually finalize our CCL goal. And that concludes the technical presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Bryant. Are there any board member questions for the superintendent regarding the technical presentation tonight? Member Lessons? We'll go to Member Holland.
I'll ask it. How is attendance taken in a high school setting? It's my understanding that attendance in elementary may be taken in the morning and in the afternoon. Is attendance, I mean, if somebody has 90% attendance, does that mean that, like if you're getting your attendance taken every period of the day, like the aggregate is 90%? Or like, what if your student is cutting math class? Like, how does that factor into attendance?
Okay.
I guess that's a kind of a detailed question, but I just don't know or understand.
Sure. I'll actually ask our former high school principals to answer that question.
So attendance at a high school is done by period, and it's a fractional piece of every school day. So it's done by a fractional piece of each school day.
So does that mean that if I attend 3 periods in a day, I'm
gonna pose that to our assessment and evaluation senior director Chris Opitz here.
So it's an aggregate. So with 7 or 8 periods in a day, it's taken for every period, and those fractional components will add up to an overall attendance rate.
Member Lessons, Member Holland.
Yes, this is a comment not about this specific report, but I had a conversation with State School Board member Bob Griffin recently. He'd been to a conference where they had broken out a lot of achievement data by gender as well as ethnicity and different groups. I wanted to ask if, as we're able to do that in ASD, if we can begin to also, they're seeing trends where they're starting to separate, and just in order for us to be aware if we're impacting one sex more than another, or we've got issues in achievement at certain grades, that in the future, as we're able to make that data differentiation, that we begin to do so in our presentations. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great comment. And we responded to the feedback for the last presentation by adding the gender. And I think it'd be a great idea if we continue that practice and we can discuss the gender differences at our next presentation.
Thank you, Member Holman. Any other questions on the technical report before we move on? Hearing, seeing none. Thank you, Dr. Bryant. We'll move on to public comment. Read the introduction here first, and we'll begin with our speakers. Welcome to the school board's first opportunity of the evening for public comment. The board has set aside a 1-hour time slot at the beginning of the meeting for public comment. Public comments in excess of 1 hour will be heard at the second opportunity for public comment at the end of the meeting, or comments may be submitted in writing. During public comment, board members will not answer questions or engage in discussion with members of the public. This is the public's time to speak and the board's time to listen. The school board welcomes the public to observe and contribute to our meetings through their comments. However, to be productive, our meetings must be structured and civil. ASD conducts public meetings under the Roberts Rules of Order, a set of rules for orderly meetings that have been used since the late 1800s. Those rules require the board and the public to be civil and respectful of each other's opinions and statements. Here are a few of the requirements under Roberts Rules. Do not attack a member or speaker's motives. No profanity or foul language. Refrain from disturbing the meeting. No cheering, applause, outbursts, or waving of signs or posters. If you have handouts that you wish to share with the board, please give them to Ms. Foster, who is seated to my left. As the chair of this meeting, it is my duty to enforce these rules of civility and decorum. As such, and consistent with Robert's Rules of Order, I have the authority to rule any speaker out of order for violation of these rules or failure to conduct themselves in a civil manner. Additional details and information can be found on the handout located at the door regarding audience participation and rules of the boardroom. With that said, we do not have any student speakers tonight, it appears, and we have a few speakers on non-action items, the first of which is Jennifer Phillips. Welcome. You have 3 minutes. Please begin when you're ready.
All right. Good evening, members of the Anchorage School District's elected board. My name is Jennifer Phillips. I started my career with the Anchorage School District in the year 2000. I have taught Spanish immersion, 5th and 6th grade, PE, health, and Ignite. I'm here tonight to ask you to not pass a proposed budget that includes cutting the Ignite program and to take cutting Ignite off the table from now in perpetuity because it's been very stressful having it as something as a line item that's going to be cut over and over and over again. Since I started teaching Ignite 17 years ago, every time the district proposes a new budget, it includes cutting the Ignite program. Why? Why does the district propose and cutting it every single time? So I'm telling you, what does Ignite cost? Well, for our operating budget, not including salaries, the 24-25 budget that's been proposed is just over $200,000. We have 19.4. I know that sounds a little bit weird, but we have some part-time Ignite teachers. 19.4 Ignite teachers serving the needs of 1,800 students in 60 elementary schools. That goes from Girdwood all the way up to Mirror Lake. Ignite has 4 full-time testers identifying students. We screen all 2nd grade students for the program. Now I ask you, why cut the Ignite program when it meets the requirements of Alaska State Law 14.30.352, Programs for Gifted Children? Every school district in Alaska shall establish educational services for gifted children that provide for student identification, student eligibility, student learning plans, and parental and student participation. The enrichment program provided in Ignite could not be duplicated by classroom teachers during win time based on the intense planning time it requires. The capacity to learn information quicker than their peers requires modifications to the regular curriculum to ensure gifted children are challenged and their unique learning needs are met. Without Ignite, many gifted children will become more frustrated with Anchorage School District's lockstep math and reading curriculum. This frustration can lead to low achievement, despondency, or unhealthy work habits. The role of Ignite teacher is crucial for nurturing and challenging our gifted students and allowing them to thrive and learn at that level. I'm not sure what that bell was. Does that mean I'm almost done?
30-second warning.
Okay.
15 seconds left.
Speaking of attendance rates, I see that Dr. Bishop, our former superintendent, spoke about it in the paper. And she said that we need to find ways to increase a sense of
Thank you for your testimony. Our next speaker is Patrick Campaign. Welcome. You have 3 minutes. Please begin when you're ready.
So on behalf of the Mountain View Lions Club and a group out of state called Remote Area Medical, I generously thank the entire school board, the superintendent, as well as the operations personnel for the approval for us to utilize the Beggage Middle School to offer a free pop-up medical clinic on April 19 through 21, 2024. And through that, I'd love to welcome all students, teachers, families, and neighbors for this upcoming activity. I'm a local optometrist, born and raised Alaskan, class of Diamond High School 2005. I've always wanted to help people locally versus having to travel overseas to do charitable healthcare. And this is that culmination. After years of coordinating, this will be the single largest pop-up clinic that Anchorage has ever seen. Last year, the Lions Club and Remote Area Medical saw over 600 local Alaskans from all walks of life and provided almost $500,000 of free healthcare services, completely without cost, and with in-kind donations by places like Beans Cafe, Providence Health Foundation, Alaska Mental Health Trust Authority, and other groups. Every dollar that was fundraised provided over $20 of in-kind services that was rendered this last year. This year, we'll accomplish this with over $1 million of local donated medical gear. ran solely by volunteers to provide free lab work, free medical, free dental, and free vision care with glasses made on site for free for those who need them. Local clinicians volunteer their time that weekend on a first come, first served basis, no appointments made, regardless of need, insurance, or the ability to pay. The biggest question for anybody who comes in is, where does it hurt? The school district is seen as a symbol for Anchorage youth and prosperity, as schools are known for positive contributions to the neighborhood for things like theater, career fairs, and voting day. The ability to run this free clinic at Baggage Middle School demonstrates the school's advocacy for the health of their students, teachers, and their families. I look forward to having you there to celebrate the Alaskan values and see how this helps the community. And thank you for approving the rental approval for Baggage Middle School for April 19 through 21, 2024 for this remote area medical free clinic. For more details, of course, you could visit their website too at ramusa.org. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Our next speaker is Amy Stanley. Welcome. You have 3 minutes. You may begin when you're ready.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Amy Stanley Collins, and I'm here on behalf of the Montessori program at Tudor Elementary School. As a school within a school alternative program serving approximately 120 students, we are one of the many programs slated to no longer serve sixth graders in our building this next upcoming year. However, while many optional programs were given the opportunity to choose to retain their sixth graders, ours was not one of them. And district administration has maintained it is too difficult logistically to staff sixth grade for such a small student population. However, unlike traditional public model schools, the very removal of sixth grade threatens our ability to be a Montessori program. One of the core requirements of a Montessori school is an upper elementary classroom made up of a 3-year mixed age band serving 4th through 6th graders. This fosters peer mentorship, the ability for teachers to meet each individual child's needs instead of teaching to a standardized grade, and the curriculum for our teacher training is designed around that model. In fact, without fidelity to this model, Tudor would lose the ability to seek any Montessori accreditation, which makes it difficult to attract and retain students, demonstrate program quality, and produce high educational Montessori outcomes. Despite sharing these concerns, the administration has shown zero support or plans for how they intend to preserve the nature of Montessori in our program, with less than 2 months to go before the first major school choice recruitment events. This lack of support, coupled with stymied outreach efforts, we believe is an intentional effort to keep the 2 Montessori public programs small enough to collapse into one building to avoid maintenance costs at Tudor Elementary. I am excited, however, to share that Tudor Montessori and Denali Montessori PTAs have been working together to provide a solution that we think will not only benefit families and protect school choice in our system, but allow us to maintain fidelity with the core requirements of a Montessori education. In the coming weeks, if you haven't already seen it, our PTAs will be presenting a joint proposal to administration asking that we expand Tudor Montessori into a K-8 Montessori program. This would offer the only public Montessori middle school for families in Anchorage. This model is well established nationally, exists for our peers in Juneau and in Fairbanks, and we know there's high demand for this model given that there are over 80 public Montessori sixth graders in Anchorage. And PTA community surveys show that 83% of our parents would send their child to a Montessori middle school if given that option. We know there is ample building capacity at Tudor Elementary, unlike Denali, for an expansion to provide such a program. It is our sincerest hope that over the next few weeks, we can work proactively with administration to find a solution that both protects this important school choice for our families in the district and preserve the integrity of the Montessori program at Tudor Elementary as we meet the growing demand for Montessori in Anchorage. We know currently there are over 60 students on wait lists trying to get into a public Montessori school still, despite both of these programs being open. As a parent group, we're deeply committed to working together and hopeful that we can find a solution that serves the interests of all involved. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Our final speaker is Ryan Buckholt. Welcome. You have 3 minutes. Please begin when you're ready.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Ryan Buckholt. I'm joined at the table by my oldest daughter, Sophia, who is a 5th grader at Tudor Montessori, which is the topic I'll be speaking about today. I was born and raised in Anchorage, and I'm a proud alum of the Anchorage School District, Service High class of 2003. My wife, Tara, and I are thrilled to raise our 3 children in the community that we love. In addition to Sophia in the back, we have David and Aspen, also students at Tudor Montessori. Now, Tara and I were part of the original family group that proposed an expansion of Montessori offerings within the Anchorage School District, an effort that ultimately gave rise to launching the Tudor Montessori program. And even before our kids were enrolled in the program, we were involved in helping the early fledgling program reach success. Luckily, we were able to get into the lottery with Sophia here and have been very actively engaged in the program ever since her entrance as a kindergartner. And this includes everything that you need from from an optional program, which includes, parental involvement in fundraising to help raise the additional funds for the extra costs related to a separate curriculum, as well as raising money to support teacher training activities. Sophia is now in 5th grade, and as you can imagine, confronted with this significant change to middle school and what this means for the education and curriculum, the philosophy that she has come to know and appreciate as a student. As Amy mentioned, unlike other optional programs, the families at Tudor Montessori have not been given an opportunity to weigh in on how our program can adapt to the very needed change that you all are pursuing within our curriculum. This is just a very difficult adjustment and really undercuts the core philosophy of a Montessori program. Sorry, I lost my place. So we've been asking for several months, ever since the summer and folks coming back to the school, on how we as parents can be engaged in helping to weigh in on this process. And unfortunately, it wasn't until recently that we got, a very clear understanding of at least the administration's proposal. As someone that's been involved in this program for a number of years, you can imagine my frustration with trying for so long to have a say into this and be involved to sort of be stymied and get to this point. As Amy mentioned, we polled all the families at Tudor, and generally everyone supports moving to 6th grade, as well as starting to look at what can that opportunity move into an 8th grade program be, and how can we meet that need for both our community, but also the community at Denali Montessori, as well as potentially even with the families at Anchorage Montessori School, which of course is a private school. So bringing those students into our curriculum. We look forward to a conversation with the administration and the board on this proposal over the coming weeks and months. And thank you all for your service to our children and the.
Thank you for your testimony. That was our last speaker, and that concludes public comments for this evening. We'll move on to E, consent agenda. Does any member wish to pull an item from the consent agenda for consideration? Member Donnelly.
Yeah, memorandum 080.
We'll pull item E4, ASD memorandum number 080, and move that to action item F1. Any other member wish to pull an item from our consent agenda? Hearing, seeing none, would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended.
Move to approve the consent agenda as amended.
Second.
Made by member Holloman, seconded by member Wilson. Is there any objection to approving the consent agenda as amended? Hearing, seeing none, the consent agenda has been approved. We'll move on to action item F1, formerly E4, ASD memorandum number 080, adoption of tentative agreement, Anchorage Education Association. Would entertain a motion to approve.
Move to approve action item number 1.
Second.
Made and seconded. We don't have any public testimony on this item. Member Donnelly, you pulled E4. Do you have comments or questions?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I intend to support this proposed adoption of this tentative agreement. I think because the essential changes in it, I think, are in the best interest of our students. I do continue to have concerns about the existing language in the collective bargaining agreement. And I just wanted to articulate those that I had previously articulated when this language was originally adopted some 3 years ago. I continue to think that we should be negotiating for a longer instructional day for our students. We do have in Alaska the shortest instructional days and the fewest number of instructional days in the nation. The combination of the two has a very, very serious impact upon the total instruction our students receive over a K through 12 education, as much as over the equivalency of an entire year of education. So while it might seem minor to expand an instructional day by 15 or 30 minutes over a 13-year time in school, it's a very significant additional amount of instruction. I also would like to negotiate for a longer school year for our students to help address that same problem. And there is another provision in section 402 of the contract, which remain very concerned about, and I raised during the last time we voted on this specific language, and that was the submission of lesson plans shall only be required for a member on a plan of growth or a plan of improvement, or if the administrator has a specific previously documented performance concern. The meaning of that language, Mr. President, is that principals aren't given the liberty to enter classrooms and make sure that there's an up-to-date lesson plan there. This is a very significant question for our students, Mr. President. When a substitute teacher comes in, it's really important that there be an up-to-date, accurate daily lesson plan available to that substitute to be able to continue in continuity with what that class is learning. This section causes a problem in that we can't guarantee that that's going to occur within our classrooms because of this section. And I think, as was recommended by the administration 4 years ago, that this needs to come out of our existing contract language. I also support taking a serious look at the evaluation process. I don't think the current process is working well. We need fair accountability for performance with our instructors. When I first got here in 2017, I asked the question, how many of our teachers received unsatisfactory evaluations? And the answer was 4 out of 3,400 teachers had received unsatisfactory evaluations. I think since that time, the ratio, which was incredibly small, 4 out of 3,400, has risen. But I still think the current evaluation program system is not functioning well and needs to be reevaluated and should be part of a collective bargaining process. I also had advocated at the time this language was adopted that we needed a minimum number of hours for direct instruction during virtual learning days. The impromptu minimum that was adopted during the COVID crisis was 1 hour per day, 4 days a week. I felt that was woefully insufficient and a serious disservice to our students. But we failed since then to negotiate a clear minimum of direct instructional time for these kinds of situations. And now we have these remote learning days. And I raised that a couple meetings ago in questions to the superintendent. And we still don't have a very clear understanding and collective bargaining agreement about what constitutes a minimum number of direct instructional hours during a day such as a remote learning day. And I think that needs to be addressed through the collective bargaining process and ensured that our students are getting an appropriate amount of instructional hours during these kinds of events, such as we've experienced recently, where we had remote learning days because of dangerous road conditions. I remain concerned about the elimination of the master's and the doctor's degree requirement to get salary step increases for equivalent university hours. I think people get their master's and doctor's degree for a reason. And to the elimination of the requirement of actually getting those degrees and instead just saying the number of hours equivalent is enough to get that increased pay, I think was a mistake in this bargaining language, the bargain language here. I continue to think there's a meaning to actually obtaining your master's or a doctorate degree, and it should be reflected in the contract. I also remain concerned about Section 409, classroom visitation. It limits parents visiting classrooms to, quote, arranged through the principal with prior notice to teachers. Spontaneous visits by the public shall be kept to a minimum. I don't think we should be having language in our contract that visits by parents to their classrooms should be kept to a minimum. Or I really think that we should be encouraging parents to come and sit through classroom and see what's going on in the classrooms. So I remain very concerned about that language in Section 409. I also think it'd be appropriate, since we are providing additional money for healthcare costs, to be provided with an actual financial accounting of the healthcare trust that's being utilized through the AEA to provide healthcare for our employees. I think it's really reasonable, if we're investing funds into it, that we get some sort of audit results or financials that examine the financials of that health trust, to be able to make rational decisions as an employer about what the appropriate level of funding should be. Without that, we're really working in the dark, Mr. President. So those are some of my continuing concerns with the language in this contract. I voted against that language last time, but I recognize that this 1-year agreement is really keyed around the increases in pay, which I believe are appropriate, and the increases for the costs of healthcare, which I believe are appropriate. So I'm going to be voting for this, but I just wanted to put in the record, it doesn't mean that any of my concerns from the last time have gone away. Those remain concerns to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Donnelly. Member Higgins, I see your microphone's on.
Thank you. I'll be brief compared to that. I just want to say, appreciate what has happened here, both the Anchorage School District Administration, Human Resources, Employee Relations, Labor Relations, and AEA negotiating in good faith, coming out with an extension, recognizing the need to do so, and having it done in a very supportive way with each other. I'm totally supportive of the fact that we've got through this process. Yes, there are opportunities in the future for all kind of changes that can help us in academics and other changes that will impact the contract in points. But I just want to express my appreciation for how well this was done, relatively quick and in a positive way. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Higgins. Member Holloman.
Yes, I'd like to take a moment to speak to some of the points that Member Donnelly raised. And I say this as someone who's spent a few years in the classroom. One, I have looked online, and there are some places where you can find the state requirements for number of days and hours in the days. Alaska is not the shortest. It's not the longest, but there are a number of states that don't require 180 days. And in terms of the length of the day and the number of days, we're in the mix. I didn't actually rank them. But I'm not sure where your numbers are coming from. I'd love to see it. And keep in mind, I firmly believe that we need a 13th year, and we need a longer school day, not necessarily for all staff to be present the entire time. But I would love to see a school that opened early and closed late, that students were able to utilize in a flexible way as they needed it. Some students need to be in school all day long and then some, and other students don't. It really varies. We're not in a position to offer that kind of flexibility because it's expensive. And again, when we're negotiating a contract, I think we try to negotiate what we can afford. We count on the volunteer time and donated labor of our workforce to run the system we've got. So when we talk about adding days, I suspect someone on the staff may know the per diem for what it costs to run the school district for a day. It's not a trivial figure. I won't put anyone on the spot by asking, but it's steep, and we don't have it. We don't have the funding from the state to make that change. I would love to see more of our schools open in the summer, not just in our traditional summer school, but in ways that that offered significant help to students. But it all costs money. And if we manage to do it somehow without raising our budget, it means that it's fallen on the backs of our staff to just do it for free. And I don't advocate that. I think people should be paid when they work. The other thing I wanted to note is that the item about lesson plans goes to a time when some principals simply required them to be turned in by some staff or all staff. They weren't being reviewed. They weren't being looked at. As a new staff member at a high school in the 90s, I was asked to turn in daily lesson plans. And we had a week that included some fire drills and bomb threats and activities and other things that disrupted school to the point that when I got ready to do my plans for the following week, I realized we really just needed to do what I had hoped to do the week before. So I changed the dates, turned them in just as they were written the week before. They came back with an initial on them. Obviously, no one had read them. No one was tracking it. No one was keeping track of it. I just changed the dates for the rest of the year and kept turning that in. It's a useless activity when it's done in that regard. But if a principal goes into a classroom and a teacher has no plan, or a substitute shows up and there is no plan, that is something that's actionable by the principal in a disciplinary way to that teacher. It doesn't prohibit, it doesn't relieve a teacher of the professional responsibility to have a plan of instruction. That is basic, and you have to have it. It simply means that administrators can't arbitrarily have people turn something in daily that's not reviewed, not used, has no benefit to students, staff, or the teachers. The part about degrees is interesting as well. I'm one of those people that taught with a bachelor's. I started a master's program several times because I saw things that I thought would benefit me in the classroom. Several of the classes absolutely did. And I'd see a whole semester of classes that, while it would have gotten me a degree and would have put me on a higher lane and made more money, frankly, I didn't see any benefit to my students in pursuing it. So I started and stopped a master's program a couple of times. Keep in mind that if someone's in a master's program and they get that degree, ASD has very little say over what they're taking, what the direct benefits are, whether or not it really is a benefit to students. If they're not in a program and they're taking individual classes that move them on the salary scale, ASD has to approve them in advance. And they don't do it automatically. They do look at whether or not it relates to what that teacher's doing, the subject they're teaching or going to be teaching. And so there's actually more scrutiny and I would say more potential for benefit to students in the district from teachers that are taking a la carte classes, in pursuit of higher pay, but also in pursuit of the specific kinds of learning that benefit the students in their room. Lastly, on healthcare funds, it absolutely is a huge concern that we get the most benefit for our employees as possible. I've never heard anyone suggest that Blue Cross Blue Shield should turn over their financials at a time they covered a lot of the district, or that other health organizations should. We can look at what the plans are. We can look at the deductibles. We can look at what's covered. We can look at the scope of their networks. We can look at the product that's offered to our employees and all the different plans that are covered. There's quite a patchwork. And this is something that I've asked, and I hope the administration's in the process of putting together and compare that to the cost of what the charge is. Whether or not that plan's making a little money or a lot of money or whatnot, I can see the curiosity of it, but I don't see where we have a right to it or that it really matters. What matters is, are things getting paid? Or when employees file a claim, is it fairly reviewed in a timely way and checks cut? And if it is, and the coverage is the same or better as another plan, I would call that a win. And we should look at the performance of the other plans, but the back end of their financial accounting, those things are generally confidential for non-public organizations, and it seems like they ought to be. So I do think it's possible to read some of the things in the contract and come away with a misunderstanding of the reality of it. When you look at a statement like a principal can't require daily lesson plans, I understand why you would read it the way you would read it, but the reality is they can ask to see plans. They can ask what you're doing, what you plan to do tomorrow. And a teacher that doesn't have an organized plan, a principal can decide right then and there that they need to do a formal evaluation of their performance in the classroom. And part of that involves pre-conferences, looking at plans, direct observation to see that those plans are being followed and the delivery in the classroom, and then a post-observation conference about the success of it. I do think the numbers of people we turn over is probably lower than it should be. I think part of it goes to the workload that's placed on our administrative teams, because we don't have as many administrators as we used to. There are a lot of steps in the evaluation process that have to get done, and that can limit the depth that an administrator can spend with particular teachers in the process. And there's also the very real consideration that if you have someone doing a job at a certain level, it may not be the level you desire, but you have no expectation that you could replace them with someone better. A poor evaluation means that you've got to let that person go and replace them with someone that you don't expect to do as well. It was very different in the 90s when there were literally thousands of people on the eligible to be hired list. People that had been screened for their certificates, for their basic ability to come in and work in a class. We don't have that anymore. And even 10 years ago, I know principals that when they had openings during the year would review everyone for that specific field, say math or science, to hire and decide to use a long-term sub in the hopes that somebody would show up over the summer or graduate from UAA at the end of the semester that looked like a more viable fit. We don't have the pool to be as choosy as we should be to our kids. And I'm going to say it's a direct result of the way we've been funded for a long time. We kind of picked 2017 as a benchmark, but the reality is for 15 or 20 years before that, wasn't so great either. But in the year 2000, we had a contract that drained the field of applicants of people that want to work in Alaska, that want to work in Anchorage. And until you actually have a pool of people that you would like to hire and place in a classroom, there's a limit to how many people you can kick out the door. And honestly, I'm a big advocate of kicking people out the door that aren't doing a great job, but you have to have someone to put in their place in the case of a classroom. You can't just tell kids, stay home for a week while we search this out and try to find something. So I would like for us to revisit these points, and if I'm wrong on the number of days and hours, would be happy to pull that back. But I looked into it. You raised it a long time ago, and several times when I've looked into it and looked at charts across the states, I see about the same number of days, about the same number of hours, and in some cases less. And of course, what we're looking at is state minimums, and some districts may do better than that. We're doing about what the state requires and not a lot more. So there could be a lot of variability in it, but we seem to be in a reasonable place. And if we want to do more, I think we've got to be ready to put millions into adding days or adding hours to the contract. I would love for us to be able to do that.
Thank you, Member Holloman. Other comments? Member Lessons.
I sort of have a memory, and maybe Mr. Ratliff, you can refresh me. Is it about $2 million a day that we pay, and about $10 million a week for our operations? So if we wanted to extend time, either duration of a day or a week or a year, are those the figures that we're working with?
My recollection is 2+ million, somewhere in that range, but I have to give, cost of increase by per person since the last time we did that a few years ago. So we'd have to go refigure that with the number of employees we have now. But for all employees, I think it was 2.5 maybe, but don't quote me on that.
Other discussion on this agenda item? Hearing seeing none, Member Donnelly.
I'd like to thank the member for those points. I just respond that my numbers are from a couple of years ago. It was the last time I did all this research. And you have to look really carefully, because in Alaska, our minimum number of days is offset because we're allowed to count in-service days against them. And that's very atypical around the country. So it's, it's one of those apples and oranges comparisons. Also, I think it was solidly confirmed that we did have the shortest actually required hours in the day. The difference between the contractual agreement to a particular health system and the ones that you're identifying as in the private sector, like Blue Cross or Blue Shield, those things, is those are typically done in a procurement point of view. In other words, they're competitive. They compete for a contract. We don't have that in this example. So I think that's the distinction between wanting to know what the information is about the actual delivery costs and how it's structured versus the private sector if they were competing in a competitive way for the contract to provide healthcare for our employees. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Donnelly. Seeing no other comments and wrap up, I'll just state for my part that I appreciate administration and the AA team for bargaining in good faith and producing an agreement that at the very least received consensus. To that end, I think this is a step in the process of this board doing what it can to remedy our recruitment and retention challenges. We know that our retirement system for education professionals in Alaska is fundamentally broken and deficient when compared with the rest of the country. We need our legislature to step up and address that problem. We also know that Alaska cannot produce, as it stands right now, enough educators to fill vacancies across the state, so we're forced to recruit from the lower 48. And I think this step is, we'll be approving here in just a moment, is a step in that process to approve this tentative agreement. I am interested in this board continuing to explore how we can support our educators and education professionals going forward, and continuing to be engaged in that front as a board. With that said, Ms. Foster, a voice vote, please.
Member Holloman,
Yes.
Member Donnelly,
Yes.
Member Higgins, Member Lessons,
Yes.
Member Wilson,
Yes.
Member Jacobs,
Yes.
President Bellamy.
Yes.
ASD Memorandum 080 passes unanimously 7-0. With that said, that is our only action item tonight. We will move on to non-action items. Is there a board member who wishes to discuss a non-action item that will be in front of us at our next meeting? Member Holloman.
Yes, on item number 1 on the sale of surplus property, a teacher was in touch with me about the item on here, a growing dome that was bought with grant funds as part of a project at a school that does growing a lot of plants outdoors as really a multidisciplinary activity. And what happened, COVID kind of interrupted everything. They've been unable to get the engineering papers that would be required for this to be erected. So it, in essence, is a brand new kit for putting up a dome with a door to have an on-site greenhouse. The project's no longer viable at this point. But the ask was that, you know, normally when we are surplusing something, it's something that's been in a school, it's been used, its usefulness to the district is done, the life expectancy of the object may be done. But in this case, it was a never used item purchased with a grant. And the ask was if there is some way that some of the funds could be turned back into the program, which is still going on. It just wouldn't include a growing dome any longer. Probably an ideal thing if there was a way for the district to assist in causing it to actually be constructed. That would be marvelous, but I don't know all the complexities in that. But the people that have been managing the project, and we have a retired teacher that still volunteers time on this particular project, has talked with the people that made the grants initially in order for this to be bought. They all understand the reasons that it's not going to happen, but wish that some of the proceeds could go back into the program itself, which was what, you know, it was the program they were trying to assist when they made the original grants to the school to do this. So I don't know everything about all the back end of it. My ask would be between now and the next school board meeting that the administration take a look on whether we're able to divert some of those proceeds back to the program at Bowman Elementary. And like I say, if in fact there is some way the district could help facilitate this being used in the original way the process was meant to happen, I think that would be the happiest outcome. But I also realize that just may not be possible within the scope of what's required. So I would make that ask of the administration. And then if this is on the agenda 2 weeks from now, that'd be part of the commentary from the administration. Thank you.
Mr. Ratliff, would you like to comment? Or if not, we can provide a write-up.
Yeah, so I've been in contact with the school about this one, and given the grant conditions, the purchase was actually split between a grant and some school Fund 5 accounts, which is student activities. I think it was raised by the PTO there. So the plan would be if this goes to auction, the proceeds would go back to proportionally between the grant and the other account that purchased it. So the school would retain the funds, and for the grant conditions, they can spend it on whatever the grant allows after they refund those, and then the other will go back into their PTO account. It'll just be proportional. So they'll get their money back if they do sell it. I think we've worked out the logistics on that.
Any other questions on the non-action items? Questions or discussion? Member Donnelly.
Thank you. Item 2, Memorandum 081.
Please proceed.
Yeah. There's been a couple versions of this, so I want to say up front, if I'm working off the wrong version, I apologize and want to be fixed. The version I think is the final version. I would call the members' attention to page 2 and paragraph 5, line 3, where it reads, budget cycles then to backfill its growing general fund deficit by allocating more than 102 million. I think that language, if this is in fact the final version we're looking at, that language that begins after the word cycles, then to backfill its growing general fund deficit, was a leftover from a prior version and doesn't really belong there anymore.
I think that I think you've caught an error from the governance committee conversation that maybe needs to be addressed. So I think that is something that we should look at over coming days, and I appreciate that flag.
Thank you, Member Donnelly. Perhaps President Bellamy, Finance Chair Lessons, and Governance Chair Holloman can get together before our next meeting to decide if an amendment's required or if we can consider it a housekeeping change. Okay. Any other questions or comments regarding the non-agenda items? Okay. We'll move on then to our next item, which is Superintendent Update. Dr. Brown, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a few updates today. Number one, we look forward to our college career and life readiness community convening tomorrow. This is number 2. Time has flown by since October, but we're thankful for the robust feedback from the community at that event. And we're excited to unveil that information and to also get those tactic teams underway as part of our CCL transformation. Another update, as some of you all know, I saw you in attendance yesterday. The senior leadership of the AEDC, the Chamber of Commerce, UAA, and myself served on a Make It Monday panel to speak on the power of partnership when it comes to this college career and life readiness transformation that we're calling the Academies of Anchorage. So we're incredibly grateful for the time and expertise of these and other organizations, including United Way, in support of the academies. I believe that the Academies of Anchorage possess enormous potential to jumpstart the state's talent, recruitment, and development pipeline. And if we can get the academies right, I envision that one day we'll have thousands of ASD grads that'll be fast-tracked to high-demand jobs right here in Alaska, if not post-secondary credentials, if that's what they'd like to pursue. And for that reason, I hope that the legislature shares our enthusiasm for this type of work. I think an investment in our schools truly is an investment in the future of our workforce and our economy as a state. So we look forward to welcoming our elected officials to our annual legislative luncheon this week. But if all of that said, if things don't turn around from a funding standpoint, we're definitely headed in the wrong direction because ASD needs to plan its budget around another year of flat funding, as this board knows, and of course, as the public has probably heard numerous times, but we're looking at a deficit approaching $100 million. And I do hope that this Saturday, our board work session will be a helpful exercise to explore potential options for reduction scenarios so that we can get a better grasp as to what are the trade-offs and risks given the path that we'll need to take. And as was shared earlier today, when the bulk of your budget is personnel, there's no painless path forward when it comes to addressing such a huge deficit. So with that said, my hope is that there's more fervor and enthusiasm than ever before to advocate at the state level for adequate funding for education. So on that note, I'll conclude my remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Bryant. Questions for the superintendent? Member Higgins.
Yeah, I always appreciate feedback from the public when they talk about different programs, and I've got grandkids involved with the Montessori program. I acknowledge that up front real quick, but they did raise some questions recently to me while I got trapped in my home and with a number of different parents. And that is the 6th grade at Denali is allowed to continue, but the one at Tudor would not. But the 6th grade is not a 6th grade class. It's a 4, 5, 6. And, and they don't, and it's not like they go between if you get so many in this class and so many in that, you don't transfer them to the non-Montessori school as transfer them back. So it didn't make sense that would be the case. But I don't know if that's that big an issue, because I don't know if the parents really want their kids to be in 6th grade and elementary if they can't have the 7th, 8th. So it's just something to explore. But I think it's a good issue asking why the 6th grade would continue at Denali and wouldn't at Tudor, because there's no relationship between 6th grade and the non-Montessori classrooms. So you're not like you're switching them back and forth. So leaving it open to parents seemed to make logical sense, because then you have a 4, 5, 6 classroom, which is consistent with their group. So I know there's a lot of issues that we're going to have to deal with we got unknown fundings, we got all the other stuff out there. But that's one issue I would hope would at least be looked into carefully. I know that how we fill all the slots there was the issue raised. That's being looked at very carefully, and I appreciate that already. So I'm comfortable with that. But this is, to me, a legitimate issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Higgins. Other questions for the superintendent? Okay. Seeing no others, we'll move on to school board comments. We'll start with Member Higgins on my left.
Well, just start by saying I always appreciate the people talking the Ignite program, Montessori. I'll make a special outreach, the free clinic advocacy. I appreciate that a great deal. I remember when Clark started with their clinic there when I was on the board earlier, and how well it's been effective with the information we receive. And so I appreciate what they're doing a great deal there. I'm also pleased that, and I'll share it with others, that the board has taken a position within the governance committee to be active in internal operational audits that are very cheap. And the administration already taken the initiative there with the Council of Great City Schools over the issue of like benefits, looking at things. And I appreciate the cooperation and support and the initiative they took in regards to that. But I think that's showing the board's responsibility for oversight in regards to accountability, things that the National School Board Association advocates. And I think it's one that's beneficial for the public, beneficial for staff, the administration, for the board, everyone involved. So there were a couple of audits that were voted on, and I'm real happy with that going forward. And I just feel like it's been a good week to see that kind of progress made in that regard. So something the public should take interest in, because it's a serious, issues that we want to review. They've been very successful in the past on the website. So some of the prior Council of Great City Schools audits that public can see what type of things are done. It costs like $45,000 to do something that normally would be a very large 6-digit figure plus. And we wouldn't be able to get it any other way. So I'm just real pleased with the outcome of that and the progress, and think the public should be aware of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Higgins. Member Donnelly, the floor is yours.
Mr. President, first, I was just wondering, I had thought that in the past, at some point in time, our minutes or our board meeting, well, I need to do some more research into how we record our minutes actually on that. So moving on. At our last meeting, during the debate on the bonds proposal memorandum, the president suggested that I was out of order in discussing the potential of doing an amendment on a specific subject related to the main motion before I moved an amendment to the main motion. And I disagreed with that interpretation of Robert's Rules of Order, pointing out that in 2001, I had gotten an actual written opinion from our expert resource for interpreting Robert's Rules of Order, saying that that was appropriate, that I was proceeding with my debate appropriately. And I had initially suggested that I was going to ask for a ruling on that at the beginning of this meeting, but I appreciate your research into this subject, and you provided me with the research you had done since the last meeting that indicated that I was in order to discuss elements of the main motion that might lead to an amendment, and that now we have confirmation from the resources that we use as an expert on Robert's Rules of Order, that I was proceeding in order at that time, and I wasn't out of order. And I appreciate your research into this that confirms the position on Robert's Rules that I expressed during the last meeting. I would hope that, as I had requested back in 2001, this documentation of that interpretation be included once again in the record for future reference so that it's very clear that a member can speak to the main motion and express concerns about the main motion that would lead to an amendment and then subsequently move an amendment.
Thank you, Member Donnelly. Mr. Pack, you have closing comments, sir?
Sure. I guess I'd like to recognize the students in the back of the boardroom today and how they exemplify the fundamental civil servitude and those public service ideals that Anchorage wants to inspire, like through the CCL initiative. And I would also encourage more student testimonies. It seems like we've been lacking some in the past board meetings. And there are a lot of issues that are affecting students right now that students should honestly speak about their daily experiences in the classrooms. So I'd like to encourage that. I also would like to appreciate the joint assembly resolution with the school board of increasing the base student allocation. It seems like a lot of the problems we're dealing with are always tied back to our budget issues and our deficits, and that weighing problem that's on our shoulders, the $100 million deficit. I'm not an economist, but that sounds like a large number, and the problems are only going to get larger unless we have people advocating at the next legislative sessions in Juneau, and whether that be testimonies in person or through phone or emails. I think that needs to, that points to an urgent need that testimony is required. And I'm also looking forward to attending the legislative luncheon, where we can also realign our priorities or define it, and for the year to come, that we are prepared for whatever challenge we may face.
Thank you, Mr. Pack. Member Wilson.
So I just wanted to share a few of the upcoming events, which are all really exciting. We have tomorrow, as Dr. Bryant mentioned, our second community convening of the Academies of Anchorage. So excited to hear from our students, our educators, as well as our many community partners and industry partners. So very excited about that. We have on Thursday, December 7th, our Indigenous High School and Middle School Fashion Show will take place at Romig Middle School from 6 to 8 p.m. for those interested in participating in that one. On Saturday, December 9th, there is the second annual Diversity Festival at Betty Davis East High School from noon to 5. And just notification that our MECAC meeting had been canceled not canceled, but rescheduled due to weather. That will be taking place on Thursday, January 11th at 6 p.m. And the topic for that meeting will be the Academies of Anchorage. So happy we'll be hearing more about that. Our upcoming our communications committee meeting has been canceled on December 7th, and our next meeting will be scheduled for Thursday, January 11th at 1 p.m. And then this coming Friday, I think other folks have mentioned our joint meeting with the Assembly and our school board. It will be on Friday, as well as our legislative luncheon. So we have lots of wonderful things coming.
Thank you, Member Wilson. Member Lessons.
Thank you to a number of the prior comments. I'm really appreciative of the opportunity to vote in support tonight of the 1-year agreement with our educators. I hope this improves the collaborative work that we can do together over the coming months to advocate in support of the level of compensation that's truly needed to be able to retain and recruit educators at a state and national level, especially as districts around the country also face the end of their federal relief funds and face fiscal cliffs of their own. If Alaska can do more to be more competitive, I feel confident that we could bolster our ranks with the people that we need to teach our students. Students, I'm so happy to see so many of you in the room, and I'm going to speak to you right now. I'm assuming that most of you are in high school. If you have a chance, please, and anybody looking at home online, our work session this afternoon was a sneak peek at the budget cycle that we are embarking on for next year. So if you're a junior, if you're a sophomore, if you're a senior and you have younger siblings, nephews, nieces, friends, this has bearing on them. the structural deficit that has amassed since this year's high school seniors were roundabout in 4th grade, or this year's 7th graders were in kindergarten, is nearly $100 million, as Mr. Pack was sharing. We have some savings that we can apply towards that. Those savings are there by and large because we have so many vacant positions this year. So the upshot is that we can apply those savings toward our structural deficit. We're still going to have about $42.2 million of cuts that have to come from somewhere. And if you can do some quick math, we can save about $7 million per increase in pupil teacher ratio. So 6 times 7 is 42, right? Or we can cut programs like Ignite. We can cut extracurricular opportunities. Any way we cut your educations. And that's not right and that's not fair. So I'm asking you to join us in advocating with your legislators. Call them now, email them now before they go to Juneau, and tell them that you expect a plan for adequate funding so that students around the city can have the education they deserve. On Thursday, we're going to have a finance committee meeting. I appreciate Member Wilson's. This sucks. I'm not allowed to swear up here, but it really sucks. We're going to have a finance committee meeting, and I'm deeply appreciative of the opportunity and to have Dr. Larry Pikus here. He's going to be speaking to us about the evolution of litigation about adequate funding. And so I encourage all board members to attend that finance meeting. And then we get to hang out together on Saturday morning and stare down the lives that we're going to destroy. Maybe that's dramatic. But when we cut education opportunities, we're changing our children's trajectories for their future. And that's what we're looking at.
Thank you, Member Lessons. Member Holman, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. First, I do want to say thank you to the staff that worked on bringing the community health clinic to Begich. When we tried to do it before, the logistics couldn't be worked out, and it was done in another location. It's a marvelous event that benefits the community in such a huge way. They really wanted to be in Begich because it really embeds them in the community, closer to people. And it's a great facility for that. And it's the kind of thing I think we should be doing. Staff, I think, always has kept the concerns about student safety and our mission first, but also found a way to make this work. And I'm really glad to see that happen. Secondly, on the AA contract, as a former AA member, I have voted no on contracts a lot more often than I voted yes. It's an honor to be able to be on the board and vote yes on one. Sadly, the whole negotiation process often brings the pointed elbows between our staff and our administration into play more than it brings people together. It's not an affirming, uplifting process. It just is what it is, and it's something we have to go through. Hopefully we do find a way each time to maintain a strong bond between the people that actually staff our schools and make all the important things happen, and the process of bargaining for what has to happen. I'm glad that we can do a meaningful raise that once again almost keeps up with inflation. We've only been saying that for most of the past 30 years or so, but it does have some gains in there for our workforce at a time when that's difficult. I can understand the emotions that Member Lessons feels. A lot of times the talk about academics, to talk about programs, to talk about trying to shave cost, spreadsheets, numbers, abstractions. The testimony we heard earlier when someone asked, why does the Ignite program keep coming up to be cut over and over and over again? And for full disclosure, my son was an Ignite student quite some time ago when he was in elementary, when it was a more funded program and more robust. But it keeps coming up because it affects a smaller number of students. It has an extra cost to it. And every year we have to shave. We're not in a position to say we're going to keep going forward next year with everything we're doing now, and we're going to try to add some things to pick up students that didn't find school very interesting, didn't find anything that really engaged them. We've lost a lot of electives. We've lost a lot of after-school activities. We've lost a lot of things where we tried to connect with students. And the goal year after year in flat funding is to try to cut things that hurt us the least. And that's a painful way to live. That's not how anybody wants to live, but it is a reality for what public education in Anchorage has been for decades now. And it is sad because for everybody that really interacts with students directly on a day-to-day basis, you know that lots of them aren't that thrilled about school, but there's something. They really want to play soccer. They really want to be in choir. They really love their art class. And there are a few of them that really love their science class, but not very many. I taught science, so I knew. And there are a few of them that really love their English class, but not all that many. There's some that love the library. They probably wouldn't come to school if they couldn't go to the library for a while during the day. And so those things they're expensive to run. And in a lot of cases, those things are saving a small number of students. But when you make those cuts, the things that are holding those few kids here and there go away. And it takes a long time to bring them back. I hope this is a year where we start to turn things and we see funding at least maintain year to year. It would be difficult, but a lot better if we were talking about which programs worked and which ones didn't. And we were just looking at maintaining and trying to optimize programs. But really we're talking about expanding class, putting more kids in a class, having fewer electives, having fewer clubs after school, having fewer activities, year after year after year after year. And it takes a toll. It takes a toll emotionally on the people that are in the buildings, and it takes a toll on our students. And as good teachers try to remember every day, that's your only opportunity with that student. If you don't do it that year, you don't ever get to see them again. If we don't do it while they're here during the 12 years we have them, you don't get to go back later and make that up. You simply failed and you have to move on. So once again, we will talk to our legislators and we will push on the governor and do what we can. And I would just remind everyone that some of our biggest, strongest, most consistent advocates are the workforce that we have in our classes every day that are doing the work as well and spending some of their off hours trying to convince the state to fund it so that they can do a better job. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Holloman. We'll just speak briefly. The work session earlier today was helpful in clarifying kind of the challenges that lay ahead of us as a district and Anchorage as a community, and then our fellow districts across the state, working to educate and convince the legislature that our students are worth investing in. I'm looking forward to that challenge. And I think it starts Friday with our legislative luncheon. So looking forward to having conversations there. Also, just briefly, We spoke to our students in the back. It is super cool to see such a large group here. School boards in our state handle student testimony and student involvement differently at meetings. Here in Anchorage, we prioritize student testimony. So if you didn't want to hang out with us for 2 hours, you can sign up to testify and speak on any topic you'd like, and then go about your evening if you so choose. With that said, it was great to see you guys here. Thank you. And then we'll transition last to President Bellamy. The floor is yours for board member comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for doing such a great job with the meeting tonight. I appreciate you. To the students in the room, thank you for showing up. I just missed being there, but I feel the energy through this whole the whole meeting. I think it's awesome. So you guys are welcome back anytime you feel like you want to be with us. One thing that you might want to, for those of you who are seniors, the June Nelson Scholarship Fund, which is sponsored by the Association of Alaska School Boards. All districts contribute to them. There's about $1,500 scholarships that are available. And so really, you should apply. Again, that's aasb.org. And it's the June Nelson Scholarship Memorial. Just a couple of reminders that this week is a very, very busy week. In addition to today's activities, member lessons is already mentioned, the Finance Committee, which is going to be meeting on Thursday, as well as the Governance Committee. The Governance Committee will meet first, and that's at 10:45 to noon. And then the Finance Committee will meet after that. There is no Communications Committee meeting this month. We also have our joint legislative meeting on Friday morning, and that is going to be from 9 to 11. We had to alter that time so that we can accommodate for the legislative luncheon. And Joshua Peck, our student representative, will be one of our speakers at that event. And so we know we don't want to miss that. And then goal planning for next week. We will have our goal planning workshop, which we've had to reschedule now at least twice. But just to take another look at and refresh our goals and our guardrails. Not anticipating any major changes. But this is the time that we've set aside so that we can look at the work we did in June and then come to some consensus around any modifications or revisions that we might want to see. Finally, for board members, the AASB is coordinating a district advocacy representative group. And I know we share in Anchorage, we share those duties and we share them quite well. However, they are asking for one person from our board who would like to, who could fill that advocacy representative role. So I will send out more information to all board members. And if that's something one or two of you really want to do, please give it some consideration. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, President Bellamy. Dr. Bryan, any closing administration comments?
No further comment, Mr. Chair.
Thank you much. With that said, we have reached adjournment. Would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Made by Member Holloman, second by Member Wilson. Seeing no objection, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.